Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, my dear friends and participants. Welcome to this third session of our Character Counts Youth Forum. We have been addressing various issues, and as you know, the purpose is to open up dialogue between ourselves, between our peers as well as our younger generation on any topic, so that you are given this confidence that whatever you have in mind, you can share with us, you can discuss with us. There are no such thing as taboo questions. All questions can be asked, everything can be discussed, and the purpose is to engage in a meaningful dialogue, hear you out, try to understand you, and of course try to communicate certain things that I have learned in my life through my experience. So it's basically an experience sharing session in which we transfer some of the experiences that we have learned from our elders to you, and of course expect that you too, when you grow up, would be transferring the same legacy of open dialogue, of critical thinking, of viewing things in their proper perspective, not being bound by social traditions, not being bogged down by what people say or what your parents say, by actually trying to find out what the truth is. So I think as you know, that we have been trying to thrash out questions, and inshallah, as these sessions go along, we will continue to do that and maybe discuss very, very sensitive questions as well, some very, very private questions also in future, so that guidance and experience that is available to us from our forefathers is transferred to you, with this caution that whenever you hear something from anyone, including myself, don't just accept it. Critically analyze it. Only if you feel that it just does convince you intellectually, only then you can accept it, or you should accept it. Otherwise, you can keep asking questions, you can keep criticizing, or keep telling me or maybe anyone else whom you would like to share your views with, that there are certain things which you are not satisfied with. So let's begin, my dear friends. The first segment, as you all know, that has been circulated to you, I have called it the Qur'an connection. And the reason that I call this is that one of the things that we find missing with us today is that connection to the Book of God, and the way it should be found in our lives, the way we should go about reading it, the way we should go about understanding it, the way we should go about actually implementing it in our lives seems to be lacking in many areas. And it is that we do read the Quran, we have read the Nazara, just the reading part, and often the translation eludes us, often we don't feel like actually understanding or even going through the translation. I do understand that one of the reasons for this is in the manner in which the Quran is generally taught to our youngsters, to you people, that it does not create that interest in you. First of all, of course, not knowing Arabic very fluently, when you are forced to pronounce the Quran in the Arabic language, most of the time without telling you or without being told what it actually means, does not create any interest at all. And it, more often than not, it actually draws away youngsters and people like you from reading the Quran, because when you concentrate on the text or the Arabic part, not to undermine the importance of the Arabic part, I'll come to that later, but the most important thing is that you have to have that connection with the Book of God. Remember, that connection is actually your connection with God. So when you're reading the Quran, it's not just that you're reading an ordinary book. It's via the Quran that you reach your Creator, someone who made you, someone who was very, very vigilant regarding your needs. So you come to know what my Creator, what our Creator wants us to do, what He is all about, what are His great plans about us, how does He want to behave in life, is there an afterlife, if there is an afterlife, then what are the criteria for that afterlife if we are to be successful there. So there's a bunch of questions that as you grow up, you'll be confronted, because you see, the nature in this world, the nature in which this world has been created, is that as you enter your mature age, these questions do come cropping up in your mind, that why was I sent here, why was I born, what is my destination, what is my destiny, why should I behave in a certain way, do I have a Creator, how can I interact with my Creator? So these are some of the basic questions. And you know what? Religion is one of the most important, I would say, segments which relates us to our Creator. And it is not just the Quran. I often start off when I talk about the Quran by telling you that the Quran is the last book of God. It's the last book in a series of scriptures which the Almighty sent. Starting off very early, He gave this guidance to Adam, and we know from Adam to Noah there was this span, and that is why we call Noah as Adam the second, as like been calling him that. Once again, humanity started off, not that it started off independently, it started off in a particular area, and that is why Noah is called Adam the second at times, because it was as if he restarted the progeny of Adam once again after the deluge, after the flood. So this guidance has been coming from the Almighty ever since. And that is why I always encourage my friends like you to take the Quran as the last word of God, as the last book of God. Prior to that, you have several books which are still available, not in their original form, not in the language in which they were revealed, but in their translations. And hence, they do merit your attention, they do merit your focus as well, because as I said, when you start with the Quran, you have to understand that it is the final edition of God's guidance. It's not the first edition, it's the final edition. So, you know what, when I had a son who was growing up, maybe like in your age, he was in grade 7 or grade 8. So I bought him a children's Bible. And I said that just as you read the Quran, you have to read the Bible as well in a very simple form, so that you get to know how the Almighty talked to us, what were His ways. And this will also bring you closer to humanity. It will bring you closer to your Christian friends. It will bring you closer to your Jewish friends, because they are the ones amongst whom you live, maybe, or would be living when you grow up. And you should not regard yourself to be a person who is receiving God's guidance in the form of the Quran for the first time. So having said that, this was just a small prelude that whenever you do get a chance, inshallah, we'll speak about these previous books on some other occasion. But today, because my focus is that we have to study the Quran. So there is a method I have developed that you should perhaps adopt if you are able to really go through the Quran and in a very interesting way. So the first of that, I would say the first point of that method is that, first of all, introduce yourselves to what the Quran is. So I have developed a book for adults regarding some of the basic introduction or some of the basic points of introduction regarding them. But I do hope to, inshallah, rewrite it for our younger generation, so that in a very brief way, maybe in a couple of pages, they first get introduced to what the Book of God is about. Remember, whenever we study a subject, whenever we study a vast subject, it's always good to have an overview. First get to know what it's all about. And then it's fine that if you go on into detail. So the first thing perhaps I would advise you is to, whenever that book is inshallah published, parts of it can be still accessed, you go through it and make yourselves comfortable regarding what the Quran is all about. Then secondly, before starting off the Quran from the beginning, it's better if you have an overview of the Quran. And again, for your benefit, there are several books on this topic which come by the name of Selections from the Quran. And I also, in my humble capacity, have authored a small book which can be accessed online. So it's called Selections from the Quran. It will give you some of the overview regarding the way the Almighty talks to us, the way He wants us to behave vis-a-vis His guidance. So that would be the second step. The first step would be to introduce yourselves to the Quran, and I'll try to make something available for you, maybe inshallah, shortly. After that, you can read the selections, and then you embark upon reading any good translation from the beginning. And this should not stop. Once you start studying a translation, just continue with that translation. Wherever you find that there is a question at hand, there is a question in your mind, I'm always available for you. There are several other scholars whom you can go to. There are a lot of tafsirs also available. But don't start reading a tafsir, because tafsirs are not meant to be read. They are meant to be consulted. They are basically like dictionaries. You don't read a dictionary, you always consult a dictionary. So when you go and start reading the Quran and you find any question coming to your mind, just make a note of it and keep on reading. And whenever the questions pile up, so you can ask them even in our WhatsApp group, or maybe personally as well. I'm always there for you. And continue this study. Once you go through the Quran, then start again, because every time you start again, you'll realize that something has been added to your repertoire of understanding. And every time you begin again, you feel that you are gaining something new from the Quran. So I would say that Quran connection that I was talking about, or which I was actually trying to insinuate, is that it begins with the understanding of the Quran. And when you have read the Quran in the Arabic form, I mean, maybe you have a Qari Sahib at your disposal, maybe you're having Skype sessions through which the Arabic part is taught. Keep that separate. Let it go on, because that is meant for another purpose. I'll just come to that. But simultaneous to that, in parallel to that, just pick up any good translation. First, pick up a good selection book, and even before that, pick up a book that introduces you, and start off reading the Quran right from the beginning, and don't stop. And the important thing here, my dear friends, is that be very punctual. Maybe even if you can spare 5 minutes, even if you can spare 10 minutes, allocate a time for yourself. Maybe just before going to bed, maybe just after getting up, maybe coming back from games or anything else. So just fix a time for yourself, because it's always good to have a time fixed, because if you don't fix a time, you would not be able to follow a routine. So a better way would be just take out 5 or 10 minutes for this and dedicate yourself to this, and you'll find that in a very short span of time, you'll get connected to God, to the Book of God, and through the Book of God, you will get connected to God. And you know, the biggest thing that you will achieve by connecting yourself to God is that mental peace. You'll find yourself that you, the problems that you have, the things that you share, you may not be able to share with others. There are things that at times we keep to ourselves, and there are things which bother us. Even our parents at times are not able to solace or offer solace to us or offer comfort to us. It is this connection with God which keeps you going, which keeps you live the life the way you should live your life of conscience, in which you're always following your conscience. The biggest contribution of the Quran is, and of course through the Quran when you reach God, that you are able to act upon your conscience. You are always able to follow what right and wrong, of course follow what right is and not follow what wrong is. So that is the biggest challenge that we face today. Remember, the biggest challenge that we face today is to act according to our conscience. And our conscience, of course, tells us what right and wrong is, but at times we don't have the courage to follow what right is. So what the Quran gives us and what God gives us is this courage, is the spirit to fight and the spirit to say what the truth is, to say what other people think to be the truth, and to defend them, and never shy away simply because you think that if I speak the truth, if I work for a just cause, maybe my mother, maybe my father, maybe my friends would not like me. No, you'll get that courage to speak the truth. You'll get the courage to follow the truth, to abide by the truth. And remember, you've often heard of this famous dictum that we always hear in films and in movies, in which we go to the court and we testify and we say that I'll speak the truth and nothing but the truth. So this is what we do when we go to a court or we go to a forum of law. But in fact, this should be a lifelong motto for all of us. I shall speak the truth and nothing but the truth, and defend the truth. It should not just be merely a court undertaking that we give. It should be a lifelong motto for all of us. And this can only happen if we have that strong God connection. And for that strong God connection, we have to have a strong Quran connection. And as I said, for that it is essential that you just keep a handy book of God, a translation. I'll now recommend to you a couple of translations which are available at Amazon for sure, and you might even find their PDFs available on the internet in that Gutenberg project which Google is undertaking. So the first of them is called the Quran Translated, and the Quran here is spelled by a K, K-O-R-A-N, and it is written by N.J. Dawood. So you'll find it available on most websites, and I do know that it is available at Amazon. And if you don't find that, then the second translation that you could look for is, again, it's called the Quran Translated, and it is by Arthur J. Arbery. So he was a Cambridge professor, contemporary to Allama Iqbal as well. So his name is Arthur J. Arbery, and if you are able to get that. So both of these come without the text of the Quran. They just come in the form of a English translation without the Arabic text. So you can just read through it like a story, just read through it like a text. And as far as the Arabic is concerned, you must also concentrate on that. And do you know why I say that? I say that, my dear friends, because you see, all of us have another way to connect with God as well, and that is through namaz, that is through the prayer. And one of the things that really enlightens our prayer, it lights up our prayer, is that we should read the Arabic part, or the part which is after Surah Fatiha, in various ways. So if we have various passages of the Quran learnt by heart, and we are also able to speak it in fluency, we'd be able to connect to God through that prayer as well. So my contention would be that learning the Arabic from a Qari Sahib is beneficial because once you learn how to read the Quran, the next step would be that you memorize portions of the Quran. I know it's difficult, a tall order, it might seem a tall order at the moment, but if you fix it as a target in life, maybe spread over 5 or 10 or 7 years, that you have to be fluent in reading the Quran and slowly memorize, not all of the Quran, of course, that's a big task. Just small surahs of the Quran, small portions of the Quran, especially those portions which have a moral message for you and which are actually laid down in the book that I was just talking about, selections from the Quran. So if you're able to fluently read the Quran, you'll be able to fluently remember and memorize the Quran as well. And that is also essential for your prayer to light up and for your prayer to be interesting. So this is what I wanted to talk to you regarding our Quran connection. So do make an effort. It's worth the while. And remember today, when we are living in these COVID times, it should not be much difficult for you to dedicate 10 minutes maybe for the Quran, as you can do that easily, I think. Just as I said, the key to this is to fix a time in which you would always pick up the book of God and start reading it. But as I said, just follow those steps first. And until the time that book is not available regarding the introduction to the Quran, which inshallah I'll try to do my best to prepare as early as possible, what you can do is pick up the book Selections from the Quran, which is available. So first read through those selections, and then of course you can start reading the Quran from the beginning, as I said, keeping the stress on its translation as much as you can and noting down the questions that you have. Okay, now let's change our gears and go on to the next segment. And the next segment, as far as I remember, is the art of positive thinking. Now, this is something which is very interesting, my dear viewers and my dear friends, because you see, positive thinking is something which is one of the greatest contributions which a human being can make to the society that he or she lives in. A person who has negative thinking, a person who has negative thoughts, a person who is always criticizing others, always condemning others, is not a person who is going to succeed in life very much. He's just going to annoy people a lot. He's going to frustrate himself a lot. So the biggest thing that you can do is to become positive people, is to give out those positive messages to others, is to stand for positivity, is to forget negativity, is to always vouch that I'm going to do and I'm not going to give up. I'm going to move forward in life. So I'm going to spell out 5 tips for you, which can be helpful in keeping yourselves positive. The first tip I would like to tell you regarding positive thinking is that always give others the benefit of the doubt. You know what that is? It means that if there can be 2 interpretations of someone's action, and one can be a negative one and the other can be a positive one, always stick to the positive one. Let me give you an example. You call your friend, he or she does not pick up, and the thought comes to your mind that he or she is ignoring you, or maybe he doesn't or she doesn't like to talk to me, and you get angry and you talk to yourself and say, well, what the heck, why the hell is she not picking up, or why the hell is he not picking up? And that starts building that anger in yourself, because you have already assumed that person is ignoring you. You have already assumed that the other person does not want to talk to you. Now, the positive interpretation of this small action could be, maybe he or she is busy somewhere. Maybe the phone is on silent. Maybe, as often happens, the phone is being charged somewhere, and people often say, oh, well, my phone was being charged, I could not reply to you on time. So there could be a host of explanations. So don't jump to conclusions. And this is important because when you form a conclusion, you must hear out the other person's excuse or his or her view. And this is another aspect. When you are angry on a person, or maybe when you are angry at a situation, because of the fact that you have heard one side of it, never jump to a conclusion. You must always hear the other side. And this balances you. And more often than not, it may even create sympathy in you for that person, if he or she was not being able to respond in the manner that you wanted them to respond. So the first thing is, always give the benefit of the doubt. Always think positively. If something is not happening for certain reasons, try to interpret it in your own positive way. Maybe because this is happening, maybe because the person is busy, maybe if my mom is not calling me back, maybe if my mom is not responding to me regarding some of the needs that I have demanded from her, maybe she has such and such a reason. So you see, this is an attitude in life which you adopt not only amongst your family, but with your peers, with your friends. And this keeps you a person who is alive. This keeps you a person who is sought after. This keeps you a person who is always on the go, who is always willing to do something for others and expect little from others. In spite of the fact if the person is not responding, you are there to respond in a positive manner. So the first tip regarding positive thinking is, give benefit of the doubt to other people. Now, coming to the second tip. The second tip is that be less critical of others. You see, one of the habits that we have is that we keep on criticizing other people without even knowing what their issue is. And we have a habit of just gathering information, maybe just gleaning it without much responsibility, and then criticizing the other person and making comments and trying to suggest the other person that, oh, you could have done this, you could have done that. Instead of that, emphasize more on yourself. If you have to be critical, let it be on your own self. Criticize your own self, because regarding your own self, you know what the data is, you know where you stand, and that would make you a positive person. Because now what you're doing is, you're not dwelling on the faults of other people. You're not happy because other people are doing wrong, because this is one of the areas in which a human being has this weakness, that he feels happy or she feels happy when other people are doing something wrong, or maybe if they have a shortcoming, because it gives you this air that you are better than them, you have a superior mannerism than them. So less critical of others, more critical of yourself. If you're more critical of yourself and less critical of others, you'll become a positive person. You'll always have that positive vibe coming out of you, and people will always come to you to seek your guidance and to ask your advice. Because you see, people who are positive, you know what, one of the biggest qualities which a leader can have, and I think inshallah each one of you can become a community leader, can become a leader in his or her own right in the field that you would like to develop yourself. So for that, it is essential to remain positive, because if you have to inspire people, if you have to take people along with you, if you have to motivate people, it is of essential importance that you ignore their shortcomings, be less critical of them, encourage them as much as you can, bring up the good qualities that they have, and concentrate on your own self. This will make you a person who is sought after. And all of you, I'm pretty sure, are going to have very key roles, inshallah, when you grow up, when you enter life. And for that key role, and for that, for being stationed at that key role, one of the most important thing is this positive attitude. The third tip, my dear viewers and friends, the third tip that I'd like to give here is that use positive sentences. This is a very small thing, but you see, when you use positive sentences, affirmative sentences, when you talk, it has a very, very imperceptible effect on yourself. You don't realize, but it affects you. Always talk in affirmative. I will go there, I will do that, instead of I will not, you shall not, he shall not, they shall not. Try to eliminate the not part in your conversation as much as you can. It will really help you. At times, you see, when you utter positive sentences, they become that domino effect on you, in which you start thinking positively, and you start thinking in a way in which you would like things to go on and not like things to go off. So these positive sentences in which you give a message to people, okay, let's do this, let's go there, let's put ourselves to action, that will have that positive effect on you, and negativity will slowly part away from you. And don't think that it's a very small tip. It's a very, very powerful tip, because you see, what you say has a lot of effect on your actions and on your perceptions and on your own character. And remember, our forum is character counts. So if you want your character to count, you have to be this positive person who always utters positive sentences. Let's come to the fourth tip. The fourth tip, my dear friends, is that never give up. So one of the things that makes us frustrated and negative is that we give up easily on ourselves. We get frustrated. We think that, oh, it's too difficult to move in life, and if we fail once or if we are not able to achieve our target, we just sit down, relax, or get frustrated, and then all sorts of negative thoughts come into our mind, and we say, oh, well, God is not kind to me, and whatever I do, it ends up in failure, and I am good for nothing. I cannot even accomplish a very simple task. No. So it is here that you need to get hold of yourself. Give yourself a positive message, and that is, I am not going to give up. I am not going to give up. I've got to go on in life. Whatever my life is, whatever negative circumstances I'm faced with, I'm going to struggle against them. I'm going to fight them. I'm going to move ahead in life. And if I move ahead in life, these problems are going to go away from me. And to give you a very natural example, if you go out in nature and see how rivers and rivulets and streams flow, so you see, whenever a rivulet or a river comes across a huge mountain, what it does is it does not start climbing that mountain, because that is absolutely impossible for that small rivulet to climb. What it does is it just circulates it and goes ahead. So you see, when you find a problem, don't start climbing on the problem. Just avert the problem and take on the sides. So never give up. Find new ways, and you'll find yourself that you are a person who has really understood life in a way that you will never stop in life. Whenever an impediment comes across you, even if it is a tunnel, even if it is a place which is like a blind alley, think that there's going to be light at the end of it. And you know what? If you really think of that, you'll find light there. Remember that famous saying from Paulo Coelho, if you've heard of that novelist. He's written that famous book, Alchemist, and those of you who are able to read it, you must read it. He's a Brazilian, very popular story writer who actually has messages to convey through his story. So one of his books, which is called The Alchemist, is all about this, that you never lose in life, you never give up in life, you have an aim in life and you just go about it. And when you do, you will find and you realize that forces of nature, and of course God included, they come to your rescue. You think that you have a very limited scope of action, but you don't realize that your limited scope of action is going to expand hugely through God's help. Because when you don't lose hope, you earn God's help as well. And God can always achieve the impossible for you. So the fourth tip is never give up. And the fifth and final tip, my dear friends, is that whenever you feel that negativity, because even after all these positive attitudes, there is this feeling of negativity that we as human beings at times just cannot avoid. It is here that you must start counting your blessings. So the fifth tip is that when you feel negativity surrounding you, embracing you from all sides, and you don't find a way out of it, start counting your blessings. And start with your own human body. We have often discussed this. Start with your eyes, your ears, your nose, the sense of touch, the sense of smell. Imagine people who have taste buds taken away from them simply because certain diseases, they make you lose your sense of taste. So whatever you eat, you don't know what you're eating. Whether you're eating garbage or whether you're eating mangoes, whether you're eating good food, you have no taste left for you. So there are a lot of people out there who have these diseases in which they cannot taste. You can taste food. You can taste all sorts of cuisine which please you. You can hear people. And remember, when you don't hear your surroundings, you just cannot hear the chirping of the birds. You just cannot hear the streaming mountains and the streams flowing and beautiful voices of nature all around you. Remember, if you don't have that hearing, and there are so many people who are deaf, imagine what ordeal they might be going through, and people who are blind even more. So just counter all negative thoughts by the blessings that you have, and they will easily outnumber what you don't have. So my fifth tip to you would be to counter every negative feeling to counter every negative thought with this gratitude that you should have regarding the parents that God has given you, regarding the shelter that He has given you, regarding the fact that maybe you're going to one of the best schools and universities and colleges, you have good clothes to wear, you have a good transport in which you can travel, you can go for vacations wherever you like. So you see, there are so many things that you have in this world that you actually take for granted. So whenever you have those negative thoughts, start counting your blessings. Okay, let's now change our gears once again. And now we come to our third part. And this is another very interesting part. And you know what? I also feel very uncomfortable when I talk about this anger management, because I used to be a very angry person, and I have tried to train myself a lot, and I have tried to work on my anger a lot. And you can ask my wife, and you can ask some of my friends who know that my anger was something that they would really dread. But I have tried to mold myself, and when I was molding myself, I wrote down certain tips for you, so that maybe the way I have tried to calm down my anger, the way I have tried to fight my anger might help other people. So you know what, I'll give you some tips that hopefully, inshallah, I do think that they'll really help you out. And when I started to make a list of these tips, it's just a coincidence that I said that, okay, I'm going to write some short-term tips, and then I'm going to write some long-term tips. So short-term tips means what you can do immediately as soon as you get angry. And long-term tips actually mean that how you can calm down yourself before anger even comes to you. So I'm going to enumerate both of them to you, and just by a sheer stroke of coincidence, the short-term tips are 7, and the long-term tips are also 7. So there are 14 tips in all, 7 short-term ones, and 7 long-term ones. So the first one, bear with me, and it would be good if you could note them down somewhere, because they do help when you go over them again. The first tip, now we're talking about short-term. When I say short-term, it means that when you get angry, you have this urge to do something, to talk back, maybe to hit the other person, or to do something that really releases your furor inside. So the thing that I would like to spell out in these 7 tips these 7 short-term tips is that you have to delay your reaction. Even if you are able to delay your reaction by, let's say, 10 or 15 seconds, the blood which is boiling in you, the adrenaline which is pumping in you, is going to settle down. Remember, anger is a very natural body reaction to certain things. And at times, anger is extremely a very valuable thing. For example, if you get angry for people who are oppressed, who are being unjust, that anger is totally justified. So don't think that anger is always a bad emotion. It's not always that anger plays havoc. No, at times anger is something that makes you realize that you're not going to put up with injustices. You're not going to bear this injustice which people are suffering. So in those times, even then, you have to channelize your anger, of course, into a positive form. But remember, it's not always a negative emotion. But when it becomes a negative emotion, there's a surge in your body to do something. So the short-term tips are that you have to somehow delay your reaction, because your body is going to pass through that commotion, that unrest. And if you let it pass for 15 or 20 seconds, it is automatically going to die down. So what you do is you buy time. You see, you have to delay your reaction, you buy time. So what is the first tip? The first tip is change your posture. If you're sitting, stand up. If you're standing, sit down. If you are looking left, start looking right. So you just buy time. Just change your posture. If you are able to change your posture, that surge which is going to build up in you is going to slowly die down, and then you'll be in a better position. So that was the first tip. The second tip, try to change your location. Change the place. Go out of the room. Go outside. Go to the bathroom. Go to the kitchen. So leave the venue in which you got angry. You got angry maybe because of a person, maybe you got angry because of a situation. It could be all sorts of reasons. But just change the location. If you change your location, again you buy time. And that time will give you sufficient opportunity to relax and calm down. The third tip, have a glass of water, drink a juice, have an ice cream. Maybe it's not available in the fridge, but whatever is, I'm sure water is always available. So start doing something, again, as I said, which delays your reaction. And one of them is just pick up a glass of water, pick up anything that you can eat, maybe raspberries, maybe strawberries, maybe anything that you like, maybe anything that is immediately in your access. And do tell mama about it, that you ate them, because maybe she or he is keeping account of them. So, but she'll be happy if they were able to alleviate your anger. So the third thing is have a glass of water, do something, have something to eat, have something to drink, and that's again going to divert your attention. The fourth tip, take deep breaths. These deep breaths really help, because you see the surge in you will always want that something, you should do something, you should punch someone in the face maybe, or do all sorts of wild things. So when you draw a deep breath, again what happens is that the discomfort that is found in your body, it tends to relax that. So deep breaths are very, very comforting. So the fourth tip would be to take those deep breaths. The fifth tip I would like to suggest to you is that utter relaxing sentences to yourselves. Tell yourself, come on, relax. Come on, give it up. Throw it away. So you start talking to yourself all sorts of sentences in which you suggest to yourself whilst you're breathing that, okay, forget about it. Okay, just talk to yourself, and these sentences should be in a way that they're trying to just divert your attention. And then the sixth thing I would like to suggest is that if talking to yourself does not help, start talking to God and say, oh God, what the hell is going on? God, please help me. God, I'm not being able to control myself. God, please come down. Please, I'm in a problem. I need your help. So you see, this is again going to help you out, because of course God is not going to come down, but what he might do is he might relieve you. He might give you this calmness. And again, the object is to buy time. So we've discussed 6 tips. 6, I'm going to just put forward the 7th one. So we've discussed that you change your posture, change your location, drink or eat something, draw deep breaths, utter sentences to yourselves, talk to God. So these are the 6 steps. And the 7th and the final step is, if all this does not help, I mean, you've gone through these various 6 tips, pick up a bat, pick up a racket, go and hit a pillow, and do it as hard as you can, because that is going to release your energy the most. And if you're really, really very angry, you might even tear down that pillow, or you might just tear down the sofa or anything which is soft. But that's going to release that thing which is building up in you. So my 7th tip is physical release. This physical release is really going to help you, and this is the final thing, and nothing can go beyond it. And I do hope that if you are able to hit something with a bat, and try not to damage your household things as much as you can. And if you do, please try to replace them. So I would say that these are 7 tips that hopefully will be very helpful to you, inshallah, in that short-term space, in that short-term time. So these are the short-term things. Now let's come to the 7 long-term suggested tips. Number 1. You see, when you are growing up, when you are living a life, you get to know what are the trigger situations. What are the situations that make you angry? So even before you get angry, suggest to yourself that I am not going to put myself in situations as far as I can that make me angry. You see, all of us have our weak points. We get angry when other people maybe tell a lie, when other people don't come on time, when other people don't keep promises, when other people have all sorts of bad behavior to us. So that makes us angry. So try as much as you can to not put yourself in situations which are, I call, trigger situations. I know that's very difficult, because not always it is possible for yourself to calm down, because at times you have to face those trigger situations. So, but if you can, plan in advance that whenever there is going to be a situation in which my anger is going to burst, I'm just not going in that room. I'm not just going and doing that. So that is one long-term tip. The second tip here would be that give yourself positive messages. And that is that when you get angry because of someone's fault, try to concentrate on his good qualities or her good qualities. So if your mom makes you angry by not cooking good food, or maybe not letting you go out and hang out, or not maybe going for those fast food restaurants, think of the fact that she's also very caring for you, and it's not just stopping me from a certain thing. If you get angry on her, remember what she did for you when you were growing up, and there was no one else to look after you. There was no one else to clean you up when you made that mess. She was there for you. She woke for you all night. So the bottom line is that whenever you get angry due to someone's fault, always concentrate on that person's fault. And this works in the family the best. You see, when you get angry, you should always note down the good points of your father, your mother, your siblings, your sons and your daughters, and you should always rehearse them and revise them. Because once a situation comes in which you invariably get angry because one of these family members, they act in a funky manner, what you do is you actually immediately recall, oh, my father has these good points, my brother has these good points, my friend has these good points. You immediately concentrate on the qualities, and that makes you a person who adjusts and accommodates the other person. So the second point would be that you always have your attention focused on the good points of a person who is making that life miserable for you. And the third tip that I'd like to suggest here is that learn to relax in your lives as well. You see, generally, because of the fact that we have not learned to relax, our boiling point comes to the surface very easily. If we are relaxed, so our boiling point is much below the surface level, because generally we are relaxed. Generally we are people who play games, who have enough time for entertainment, who have enough time for each other. So give yourself time. Even if you're working hard, even if you have a lot of sports activities, even if you have a lot of homework and a lot of assignments, do what makes you relax the most. It could be listening to some music, maybe watching a movie, maybe relaxing physically. So if you relax, the more you relax, the more you will be able to control yourself and the less angry you will be. So the third point would be relax as much as you can in your normal life, and anger will start leaving you when the crunch time comes. And the fourth, I would say, suggestion that I'd like to give here is that you visualize your response much beforehand. So you see, when you know that you're going to get angry, so you start saying, okay, when I get angry, I'm going to do this. I want to back away. So you prepare in advance. You tell yourselves that when this is going to happen, when my blood is going to boil, I'm going to withdraw. I'm going to work on those short-term measures and adopt one of them. So you see, this visualization counts a lot. It gives you this push that when the time comes, I'll not be acting in a rash manner. And then the fifth tip that I'd like to give is that always find out role models about you in your family, amongst your friends, who are people who are calm and calculated, who are as cool as a cucumber, who are those proverbial Mr. Cool guys who get angry very little. I mean, you can find them around yourselves. It could be your mom, it could be your dad, it could be your friends, it could be people around you, it could be among your heroes. So role models also count. And you'll find a lot of such role models in history. And I think narrated to you the story of Gandhi, who was a role model. Your own person who founded Pakistan, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, was a role model regarding anger. And then we have several other luminaries you might be coming across as well, who are extremely patient, and that made them really, really people who would really be men of crisis. You see, when you are not angry in the times of anger, you are men of crises. You are able to deal with crisis situations in a very, very best way. The sixth tip that I'd like to give, I'm sorry this is taking a little time, but because anger is something that does take a lot of time and it does make us really lose our senses, so we have to be very, very calculated and we have to plan in advance. So the sixth tip is that give yourself this message that no one is perfect. No one is perfect. You see, because most of the time this anger comes to us is because we think that there's some sort of imperfection, that people do all sorts of, they commit all sorts of mistakes. So always think that no one is perfect. And when a person makes mistake, it's not a time to get angry. It's a time to maybe relax and be patient and analyze the mistake and why is that mistake being committed, and maybe I can help that person out so that he does not or she does not repeat that mistake. So the sixth tip would be that realize that no one is perfect, including ourselves. So therefore we have to give the other person that opportunity, that concession in which he or she can recoup, and we can help that person as well. And the last tip, these long-term tips, is learn to forgive. You see, anger teaches us forgiveness also. It should teach us forgiveness because, you see, we need to realize that people like all of us, they have all kinds of faults. And just as we have our faults and we would like God to forgive us, when we'd like friends to forgive us, we would also like ourselves to forgive other people. So be a forgiving person as much as you can. Just forget about what has happened. Move ahead in life. Move on in life. Things do happen. They do get out of your control, but then start afresh. Make a new start. So these were some of the short-term tips and long-term tips. I'm just going to revise those long-term tips. At first, don't go into trigger situations that trigger your anger. Second, always concentrate on the positive qualities of a person. Third, relax in your normal lives. Fourth, visualize your response that I'm not going to behave in a certain manner. 5, look for role models. 6, think that no one is perfect. And 7th, learn to be a forgiving person. So I do hope, inshallah, if you plan out, you will manage your anger, and always remember what our beloved Prophet said. Once he said that a person who is able to control his anger is a person who has much more self-control. He is a person who has real power than a person who defeats another person while challenging him to a duel or maybe wrestling with him. So a wrestler who defeats the other opponent, the Prophet says, that's much easier than a person who defeats his anger. So learn to defeat your anger. Learn to defeat your anger, because if you get defeated by anger, you're going to lose in life, even if you are on the right side. Even if you have a good stance, if you have the right stance, anger is just going to make a mess of that right stance. I'm sorry for taking a little longer time, but again, as I said, this longer issue is something which of course is which plagues all of us. And now we come to the final and the fourth segment of our discussion, and I hope it is an interesting one as well, and that is falling in love. Yes, falling in love. So you see, first of all, you need to understand that this is something of a natural phenomena. When you live a life the way the Almighty has created all of us, the Almighty has made us such that we do develop feelings for the opposite gender. This is something of a very, very natural sort of a thing. You don't need to get worried about it. So if you get feelings for the other gender, maybe it could be your class fellow, it could be your cousins, it could be any friend, or it could be someone that you know, either in your amongst people who you know, and also amongst those you don't know. You don't need to feel guilty about it. Don't feel ashamed about it, because you see, at times if you are not properly educated about these things, or don't know these things, our younger generation tends to feel this guilt, this feeling inside us that maybe something is going wrong, and the biggest thing is that then people try to hide it as well, and they think that these emotions are something which I should not express, and my mom or my dad or maybe other people are not going to like it. I know things have changed and the world has changed, and people and youngsters don't even care about it. But people who care about religion, people who care about their conscience, people who know what right and wrong are, and I do think that all of you are among that category, they have this inkling as to understand that why, if I develop feelings for an opposite gender, what should I do? How should I behave? So the first thing I said is that don't worry about it. It's not something wrong, first of all. It's a perfectly natural thing that you have developed. And if you have developed those feelings with someone, I think the best way would be, of course, that first of all you need to realize whether the feelings are reciprocated or not. Because you see, having feelings for someone and the other person not having feelings for yourself is something which, of course, does exist in many situations, but then it's going to be something of a secret sort of an affair in which you have a certain amount of affiliation with the other person, and the other person does not even know about it. So that is something, of course, that too is very normal. But of course, unless the other person has the same feelings or reciprocates with the same feelings, perhaps things cannot go on. And if they don't go on, if they don't develop that way, then, as I said, your attachment to a person who does not feel attached to yourself, it's a cruel thing to say, but there's no other way out except to maybe divert your attention. Because you see, for having of understanding between yourselves, or maybe falling in love with each other, can only work if it goes, or it works both ways. It cannot work one way. So if this is the thing that has happened to you, that you feel some emotions for someone else and the other person does not feel them, that could be for a number of reasons. For example, that person is already interested in someone else. That could be that person does not like you. It could be many other reasons. So I think in that case, you have to be very strong-hearted and maybe back away slowly and gradually, because of course this is not going to work unless, as I said, both parties or both genders agree to that. So, let's talk about the fact that let's say in which this falling in love phenomena occurs in a reciprocative way, in a symbiotic way, such that there are people, there are two friends who develop these feelings between them as friends, and of course they would like to continue with them. So it is here that you have to be very careful, because you see, developing friendship between the opposite gender can become addictive. It is just something, because you relish it a lot. You relish it. You relish a lot to become friends with the opposite gender, that it's going to take its toll at times, and it can become a habit. So you have to maintain a certain distance. Not that falling in love or maybe having feelings is the wrong thing. The only thing is that distance has to be maintained, because if that distance is not going to be maintained, then what's going to happen is that you're going to switch partners very, very often, maybe in a very short space of time, and then go ahead and then make more friends. And until the time that you get married, this is going to be a habit developed amongst you. And even after getting married, you'll not be able to concentrate on your spouse, and your friendship, your outside the marriage friendship bond will continue. So the first thing that I'd like to suggest here is that when you develop these feelings, I think they need to be protected. I use this word protected in a very, very purposeful way. Protected means that you must protect those feelings from crossing limits. And the best way for that is that you talk to your parents and you tell them that you have developed these feelings, and that perhaps if things go right when you finish your studies, or maybe when you're able to go through your life, this is the person that you have chosen to marry, and this is how you would like to proceed in life. So falling in love with a future spouse is absolutely okay, but falling in love for the sake of friendship, and that friendship in which you are going to switch partners every now and then, that is something which should not be practiced. As I said, why? Because you see, the biggest institution which the Almighty has created on this earth is the institution of family. This institution of family is going to suffer if you develop these feelings or this proclivity towards friendship every now and then, because it's not going to finish after marriage. And instead of being devoted to your spouse, what you'll do is you'll continue with these friendship feelings with other women, with other men, in spite of being married, and your faithfulness and your sincerity will be called to question. So the way that you should proceed perhaps would be to take your parents in confidence. I know this is a very, very touchy affair. It's a very difficult thing, but because not always all parents are considerate enough. They don't even might not even let you come near them. They might not even let you discuss these things. But if that is the case, find some other elder person. There could be some elder person in the family. It could be some other person. It could be even your teacher, some person whom you can trust. Confide with that person, and that person will tell you that, okay, if you have developed these feelings, then you should actually try to maintain that distance. And the best way to maintain that distance is that you always should have a very strong, I would say, leaning towards guarding your gaze. You see, things happen when you start staring at the opposite gender. Things happen when those stares, they get out of control. So if you get those feelings for someone, try to control your stare, try to control your gaze, be to the point as much as you can. If you develop that frank friendship and you crack jokes in which you tell all sorts of things and share all sorts of personal things, then that is bound to get all out of hand. So as I said, maintaining that difference in which you indulge in any meaningful conversation, that is absolutely okay. For example, it could be regarding politics, it could be regarding maybe sports, it could be regarding anything of interest. That is absolutely okay. But when you start indulging in loose talk, you see, my emphasis would be that when you start indulging in loose talk, that distance is not maintained, and slowly that distance is breached, and you never know what then starts going to happen, and all sorts of things come into play. So maintaining that safe distance, having your own modesty about you, confiding into some elder person, and then during that period in which you are maintaining ties with some of the person that you really like, is perfectly okay if that exchange is as meaningful, as to the point, as focused towards the subject as is possible. And as you grow up, as you advance forward in life, then the proper way would be that, of course, you enter into a proper marriage contract and a proper marriage bond with that person, so that it further protects you from any other leanings, from any other deviations. So these are some of the tips that I would like to have shared with you. I've tried to make it slightly easier for you to understand. And of course, in our question answer session, you can ask all sorts of questions on this, because I know it's a subject which has a lot of tangents, it has a lot of offshoots. But the bottom line is that you keep yourself pure as much as you can, maintain that distance. Don't think that developing those feelings are wrong. As soon as you are able to get proper into that marital contract, and the way that I see is that if you think that these are, why I say I discourage this temporary friendship thing, or this temporary relationship, is that it's going to cause a lot of problems when you grow up and you start getting married and you get married. Because as I said, friendship is a proclivity with the opposite gender. It cannot just stop when you start in your teens. It's going to continue even after marriage, and that is going to be damaging for the family, literally damaging for the family. You'll not be able to concentrate on your spouse. The children that you will rear and the children that you will nourish and nurture, again, you'll not be able to concentrate on them, because you will have your eyes always fixed on someone outside marriage, because this is something of a proclivity, something of a tendency, something of an addiction, if you allow me to call it. So with these pointers, I would now end my session. I'm sorry I've taken longer than usual, because some of the points really needed elaboration, especially that anger one and then this last one. Now it's over to you, Ghazal. You can please go ahead with the question answer session. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shehzad. It was very thought-provoking and very enriching talk. I do see that our participants are a little bit shy today, which is unusual, but so far I have Minnie. So I would like to ask Minnie, please unmute your question, mic, and ask your question, please.
I have two questions. So the first one is, you said you get from reading the Qur'an, but honestly, there's so many angry verses that instead of getting a piece of mind, there are times where I'm just like,
Right. That's a very good question, and I think it's a very valid question as well. You see, that is why I always give this suggestion that before you start reading the Quran, do read an introduction to the Quran, so that the angry verses become meaningful to you, and you are able to understand that why does God gets angry at some of the people who were there in Arabia. And you'll get to know that that anger is absolutely the same anger that perhaps we would have for people who are evil, people who are arrogant, people who are rapists, people who are who commit all sorts of heinous acts, people who murder people, they hijack planes and they hijack on ransom, all sorts of these evil deeds. So you see, just as we human beings, we get angry because of certain evils that go in our lives unchecked. So if you analyze all those verses of the Quran in which God is angry, you'll find out that His anger is mostly against such people. So that's a very, very general or a generic answer. But of course, as I said, for a more detailed answer, perhaps a good book on which gives you an introduction to the Quran might be much more helpful, so that before you enter the Quran, even before you enter the Quran, you're able to know the subjects and you're able to know why this is happening and why that is happening.
Okay. Can I ask my second question, or do I wait for my turn again?
I think go ahead and ask your second question. I think our participants are a little bit warming up today, so.
And one thing I'm sorry, Mani, what I wanted to say that there are people here who feel shy in asking. They can always write down their question in the chat box. So that's another option for many of you who would not like to maybe speak out their questions. So go ahead, Mani.
So the second question is, usually I get angry when I'm like chatting with people on my phone. So changing my position or going to a different place doesn't really help. Do you have other tips? Do I just leave my phone?
Yeah. So when you change your position, you leave the phone and then change the position. Otherwise, if you're going to take your phone along, that's not going to help at all. So you put the phone on the table.
Talking to someone. Sorry. So if you're like talking to someone face to face, or like if you're talking on the phone, isn't it awkward to just leave all of a sudden?
Well, what you do is when you leave you can always apologize later on. So it's much better than maybe abusing that person on the phone or talking back to him or her than just being silent. You can come back and maybe message that person again later on, and you can say that I just got angry and I'm sorry I didn't respond to you because I thought that if I would respond, I might cross the limits. And I'm sure that person will understand.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Shehzad. Very logical answer. Next is Hamza Ahmed Ranja. Please go ahead and ask your question. Don't forget to unmute your mic.
Thank you, sir. I have a question regarding the last segment in which developing feelings for the opposite gender, yes, it is a very natural phenomenon, but we know that in this culture of especially Pakistan and Punjab, there are many parents who consider their children that they should marry their cousins or their relatives like that. And there are very few incidents in which they are asked. Even if they are asked somewhere, then their answer of given to these children will be that, oh, you are a young one and you don't have such kind of thoughtful process, and you are making this decision in an impulsive way. So how to tackle this argument that no, I am grown up and I can tackle these issues?
So that's a very valid question, and I do appreciate that this arises a lot in our culture because parents are generally overbearing. They like to impose themselves, and they would not like to respect the views of their child, who is now a grown-up person, and that's really a big problem. But you see, we all live in our share of problems, and we have to tackle these problems in our own environment in a way that we don't cause any further problem to the other person. And I think that the best way perhaps is that you can involve some other person other than your parents, in which you can communicate your wish or your view, and that intermediary is actually at times able to communicate your view in a better way, and especially if that intermediary is someone whom your parents also trust. So this is one way in which communication can be established, and I know that even that has slim chances of success, because many of our parents they end up I would say in a way in which they would like to dictate their terms, and that is why I often I'm sorry to say I'm a parent myself, but I do blame myself and other parents like myself who actually don't realize this, that their grown-up child now has his or her own view regarding a spouse, regarding a career, regarding any major decision in life. And the only way I said to put up with them is to politely, never be rude to them, never show anger to them, but always politely express your difference of opinion and stick to it. Because you see, ultimately, career choice, spouse choice, or any other major decision that you take is your right. It is your birthright. It is a right that God has given to you. If trying with all your might and all your politeness, you're not able, when I say might, of course, I means you invest all your might in being polite as much as you can. Be very, very soft. You can be hard in your stance without being hard in your you can be hard in your stance without being hard in your words, harsh in your words. So these are some of the tips. But I can be more useful if you can discuss a situation, because you see, each person might be going through a specific situation. So everyone has specifics to that situation in which some advice can be given. But a generic advice would be that always remain respectful to them, stick to your decision, and try to involve a third person in communicating your views to your parents as much as you can. And also, last but not the least, pray for them. You see, prayers, as I always say, can move mountains. If you are polite in your mannerism, if you are not rude, and you also pray to God to help you and to help your parents, inshallah, you'll find God's help as well waiting for you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next in queue is Muhammad Azan. Please go ahead, unmute yourself and ask your question.
So my question is that so there are like newspapers, right? Like where they add like Quranic verses in it. So like I don't know what to do with them because my dad is pretty frustrated with it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, would you give me an idea or suggestion?
You can burn them. Just pick up the ashes where you burn them and just throw them away. You can. Well, that's the easiest way out. And then you can it's not advisable to throw them in a dustbin, because then of course all sorts of things can happen to that, and it would be disrespectful. But the best way the easier way out would be to just burn them, or maybe to tear them up in such small pieces that they don't remain ayahs anyway, and each of the words it gets torn apart, and the ayah is actually dismembered. The verse is dismembered. So either you can tear it to very, very small bits, or you can burn them. Our past people in yesteryears, they would tie it up in a polythene bag and just throw them in a river. But that, of course, is not accessible to everyone. So I would say either have them burnt, or just tear them into very small shreds. You can shred them as well. So shredding is another way to do that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Next in queue is Shayan Rasool. Can you please go ahead and ask your question? Don't forget to unmute your mic.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Saleem. Thank you for today's lecture. I found it very enlightening. My question relates specifically to the second half of today's talk, related to relationships and attractions that an individual might experience over the course of their life.
Mm-hmm.
I recall you mentioning that one gender falling for another gender, and it made me reflect on the fact that I'm cognizant of people, both friends and acquaintances, that might have a predilection for either gender. And so I'd be curious to know how Islam perceives relationships where, a person's feelings, if pure, are for someone of the same sex or someone of both genders sometimes. And whether, how do we interact with people in that situation, and how is it perceived generally in the religion?
So you see, the natural relationship with the Almighty has prescribed, I would say, is between the opposite gender. And this I say because when He created mankind, He did not create two Adams, He did not create two Eves, He created Adam and Eve, which tells us that a natural relationship does come into being through two opposite genders, because only through their interaction can a family come into being. But having said that, it depends on what you mean by feelings that you develop between the same gender. If they are just friendship feelings, of course, there's nothing wrong with it. But if they are more than that, and you have sexual leanings in those feelings, maybe you'd like to live together and have a sexual relationship with the same gender, then religion does not view this with favor at all, and it does not like this, because it says this is an unnatural way. And we know that a whole nation of God was punished for one of the reasons that it got punished for this, that they had that same gender interaction with them. Although, of course, one of their major crime was that they had denied their prophet. But along with them, one of the bad habits that they had, which the Almighty and His Prophet tried to warn them of, is that they are not doing things according to what nature or what the Almighty has planned them for. So I would say that that is something which should be, if the sexual part is also incorporated in that should be, this should not be the case. And as far as your interaction with such people is concerned, for example, if you have two friends who might be have those same gender feelings, there's no reason for you to remain isolated for them. You see, sexual orientation is a person's own choice, and let it be judged by God if that person is doing something in his personal capacity. But as far as I am concerned, if I have a person or have a colleague maybe who is a lesbian, or a professor who's gay, because we know in Western societies, even the faculty, you know who among the faculty, the orientation that they have. So it's all openly confessed. So what I suggest is that in such cases, that you should not ostracize yourself. You should not, think of them as lesser human beings, because their orientation is their choice. Let it be a decision which they have made with God. You make friends with them, not in a normal sense. You can go about with them. You can, hang out with them. You can, whatever you do with friends, you can play with them. But if you think that their inclination or their proclivity is also starting to affect you, then maybe there is something that you should also maintain a distance from. But other than that, I think they should be considered as human beings, because I have seen so many cases in which people might have this deviation in which they like same gender unions. But other than that, they are absolutely, I would say, impeccable human beings. They are very kind-hearted. They are very sympathetic. They have all sorts of other human qualities. So I think we have to concentrate on what we think as their qualities are, and as far as their sexual orientation is concerned, we should leave it between them and their God. But if you ask me, I would say that religion itself does not encourage it at all, and it tells us that if you have this leaning, whether it is genetically acquired or whether it is acquired later on, this debate is still going on. It could be genetically acquired, which means that by birth you have these feelings. And it could be acquired from the society, which means that you had actually obtained these feelings, or maybe you were influenced by the society. In both cases, whether it's the first or the second, the thing is that this leaning has to be checked. And one simply cannot say, because that I have these birth feelings, God has given me these feelings, so therefore I should be allowed to do whatever I like. Because after all, we have people who are born kleptomaniacs. We have people who are born necrophiliacs, who are born pedophiles, maybe a lot of things. So having certain inclinations from God, there are people who are serial killers. There are people, all sorts of deviations that they have. So it's not sufficient grounds to dismiss them by saying that, oh, God gave me this inclination, and therefore I should be given a choice, or given a whole field open to me where I can express my feelings and my emotions. So I would say that whether it's genetically inspired or whether it's your acquired feeling, in both cases it needs to be checked. If you yourself are under discussion, and if other people are under discussion, then of course you should not differentiate with them and make friends with them the way you do with all other sorts of people.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Next question is by Zara Wasim. Zara, please unmute your mic and ask your question.
Hi, my question's relating to the last segment.
Mm-hmm.
So, if there's mutual feelings between two genders, what are the interactions limited to?
Well, as I just said, if you have mixed, feelings for the opposite gender, the best thing is that you maintain a safe distance. Your conversation should be more objective oriented. It should not be, as you know what loose talk is, like you crack jokes, you have all sorts of loose statements coming from there, here and there. It's not sort of a formal thing. So when you have an informal relationship, when you develop feeling with the opposite gender, they tend to escalate. They don't stay where they are. and slowly and without realizing, you at times come to a point when things do, they don't always, they can get out of hand, and you might have some nasty episode that you would not like to happen. So I think that maintaining that safe distance, indulging in conversation which is meaningful, maybe visiting them and telling your family. So you see, these are protections that you give yourself. The biggest asset that a human being has is modesty, which you call haya in Arabic and in Urdu. Haya or modesty is that sense of withdrawal, it's the sense of that you would like to be modest in your dealings. You are bashful, and that is something that, of course, cannot be taught. It is something that we acquire, and maintaining a distance is something which protects that modesty as much as you can. And the more you think on it, the more you'll able to plan out yourself, because you see, you have to also see that these feelings should be ultimately crystallize in the form of a permanent union, which is of course called marriage. And before that happens, let it be more formal. Let it be preferably in the presence. If you meet that person, it should be in the presence of maybe a lot of other people. Don't meet that person in private, because when you meet in private, then there is always this chance that you get carried away. So if you meet amongst friends, if you meet amongst parents, if you meet in a environment in which there are other people as well, so that is bound to protect yourself. So it's like saying that as much as yourself, as much as you can, keep yourself protected, keep your modesty protected as much as you can, and try to enter into that permanent relationship as soon as you can. Maybe even a nikah, which means that even if you are not able to maybe have that ultimate consummation of marriage in which you live together, even a nikah is something in which when that happens, then of course all sorts of relationship which I'm talking about, which should be abstained from, they become allowable, they become permissible. So maybe if that is the case, that it's difficult for you to abstain from the other person, then I think the proper way would be to enter into a marriage contract, which is nikah. This does not mean that you immediately consummate your marriage or you bring the bride home or vice versa. It means that you are engaged now in a formal contract, and you can now even indulge in loose talk, and you can now even talk all sorts of things, because now legally you are husband and wife, although you're still not living together. So that would be a practical way out, if of course the parents also agree and other things also go in favor. And if they don't agree, then of course ultimately you do have a choice to stick to your own decision. But I think such marriages should take place normally with the consent of parents, because it's not just two people who are marrying, it's basically two families who are going to get married or so to speak come together. So other things also can be thought of, but I think I have tried to elaborate and made my points a little bit more clear. But if you have more questions, I'd like to answer them as well.
Thank you, sir. I'll take one question from Facebook Live, and it's asked regarding anger management. And the question is that, is it true that anger is haram?
As I said, this is not true. Anger, the way anger is, it is the cause of the anger which makes something right or wrong. I just gave an example that if you feel angry because a certain person was slapped in the face and he was innocent, and anger builds up in you, I think it's a very natural thing. The only thing is that in that anger you should behave in a rational way, and instead of defending that person by slapping the other person who hit that person, you should think about other means that could teach that person a lesson in another way. So anger in itself is not a bad thing. Is not an evil emotion. It is the cause of the anger that can make something right and wrong. When you get angry on a situation which is out of control, which you cannot control, it is here that you must control it. Because you see, at times you get angry because situations or people behave. You come across situations which are unexpected. You come across people who behave in an unexpected manner. But what happens is you don't realize that these things are happening because God has given permission that let these things happen. So there is a scheme of God also which is going on. So at times our anger is against that scheme as well, if you look back a little more deeply. So I think that it is of primary interest to understand this, that anger is not always a bad thing. It's just a question of channelizing your anger when it comes to you because of a good cause. If you are angry for an oppressed person, and that anger can be channelized by helping out that person, and by, of course, helping the other person who caused that injury as well, then that is the right way out for that.
Thank you, sir. I have one written question from one of the participants at Zoom, and I'll read out this question, and she would like to, she want to know about your thoughts about it. So here you go. The question is, I'm a critical thinker, but I do not feel comfortable raising too many cross questions. But then people around me raise such questions through me, and it makes me feel very bad about myself. People make me feel that I get brainwashed by my father or scholars, etc. But that is because I'm convinced and I do not wish to confuse myself. But it is often makes me feel that I have been conditioned to think in a certain way. Please help me understand about this.
That's kind of a complex situation. You see, you are a critical thinker, but you would not like that critical thinking to come into expression, and at the same time, you'll find other people using your brain and perhaps communicating their critical thoughts through you. Is that what you are trying to convey, if I understood correctly? Because that's what I think that you are saying, and if I am correct, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong. So the gist of your question that I gather is that you are a critical thinker, but you are a private critical thinker, and you would not like to express it yourself unless, of course, you are pushed. And this happens that other people, they use your brain, or they would like to communicate their probably grievances or critical thinking through you. And when you express your thoughts, then people say that you have been brainwashed by those people, and therefore it gives a wrong impression about yourself. I'm sorry, I'm trying to understand your question. If this is what you meant, I'm going to answer that. In case I didn't understand your question, you can always privately email me or WhatsApp me or whatever. I can go deeper down and try to understand your question. So in this case, which I've understood, if that is correct, I would say that I think that this is something that is entirely up to you. When you are a critical thinker, of course, you have all the time, all the authority to refuse other people, that you are not going to become a vehicle of their thoughts and ideas, and that you have your own way of thinking. And if that way of thinking is one in which you don't express yourself, it doesn't mean that you are going to accept all kinds of ideas from other people and convey them to other people, and you just become a medium or an intermediary for that. So I think a very good way would be to politely step down from that responsibility and just tell them that this is something which you would not like to do and not like to go on with, and you are a private person, you would like to do it the way you have it in mind. But I think because you're maybe a personality who's more silent and maybe non-expressive, that people take disadvantage from you. So I would just suggest that just take this one step for just once, and hopefully things should come better. That just for once, let the other people know how you are behaving and what you think from inside, and what you would not like other people to do to yourself, so that they get an idea. Because of the fact that maybe you're reticent, you don't talk back to them, they think that you are absolutely obedient to them and culpable to them, and whatever they are telling you is just what you would like to hear and communicate. So maybe just once you need to communicate your thoughts. So that is what I would say. But if I have misunderstood you or not understood you properly, please do let me know, and you can inbox me.
Apparently, it looks like that she got your answer, so we are for now good. Next question is by Minnie. So please, Minnie, go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, one more question.
Right.
So, you mentioned that friendship becomes an addiction, and that's why, or romantic friendship becomes an addiction. But there's so many cultures where you can easily get married and divorced, and there are people that get married for a night and then they get divorced the next day. How is that different from a one-night stand? And like, why is that okay versus having a partner?
So that's also not okay, because you see, when you marry someone, there has to be some reason if you have to separate from that person. If it's not just for pleasure, I mean, this happens for pleasure generally when you have those one-night stands or maybe temporary unions. So you see, you have to understand that when you enter in such a relationship, it has to be permanent, because if you don't do a permanent relationship, you'll be switching partners every now and then, and you will never have a settled life, you will never have a proper family, and when you grow up, you'll feel the brunt of it, because you see, when you are smart, when you are moving along in life in your 20s and 30s, you feel that you're going to conquer the world. But once you enter your 40s and your 50s and maybe 60s as well, and later on, you'll feel that loneliness coming over you, because you don't realize that the manner in which God has removed that loneliness from us is from the institution of marriage. So He wants us to have a permanent companion, a companion who was there with us through thick and thin, when we were in our salad days, so to speak, when we were growing up. And now that we have grown up and we've entered mature age, we have grown old, the partner is still there for you. So you see, we need that companionship for on a lifelong basis. So I would say that whether it's a one-night stand, or whether it's those temporary relationships in which every now and then, every maybe a few weeks, you enter into a new partner, and then you divorce, and then you make new friends, and it goes on for life, is something that's going to take its toll. You might not realize it now, because you see, this is the time when a person is always jubilant, a person is always boisterous and energetic. It's only when he or she enters that middle age or that advancing age does that feeling come upon you. And you see, guidance which the Qur'an, God gives us, is for the complete lifespan that we spend in this world.
So then in that case, you shouldn't be allowed to marry like more than one partner, as like how men are allowed to marry 4 women in Islam.
So we are going to discuss this in a session coming up very soon on Wednesdays, that when we discuss women misconceptions. So that's going to be discussed. So maybe that is something that you can hear there as well. Are you in that session?
Thank you so much.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
But I'll join it for sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Another question from one of the participants is about the segment where you have discussed positive thinking traits. Her concern is that when someone blames you for something really huge, for example, you've been blamed for someone's death, in that situation, we can't really help our own thoughts. Mm-hmm. How we should go about it?
Well, you see, if a person blames you for as grave a thing as death, that you caused someone's death and it was you who were responsible for that, and if you are, your own conscience is absolutely clear, and you think that the person is casting a wrong blame, then the first thing that you need to understand is that your conscience is clear. You are not the person who has done that wrong thing. It is just that there is some miscommunication maybe in which the other person is misperceiving your actions. So instead of getting angry, because you see what often does happen is that as soon as we have this blame on us, we start feeling angry because we feel that we are innocent. So therefore we say that, well, how dare that person blame us? This is one of the reactions that we people have often gotten used to. I would say that again, be more considerate, be more understanding, just calm yourself, just think of the other person, that he has misunderstood your stance, or even if he has understood it correctly, he is making a wrong conclusion. He is not going through the proper reasoning himself, maybe for some reason. So don't react, because if you react and you talk back to him or maybe are harsh to him, that's not going to solve the problem. In fact, that's going to make him even more adamant on the fact, well, yes, this person is to blame because he's becoming angry, and the reason for this anger is that he does not want to get that blame on himself. So act as a cool person, just ignore him for that conversation, and then analyze that why did that person get angry with me, and then search for a common friend and communicate to that common friend that, well, this is how our other person was thinking, and you know that I never did that. So could you be very kind to clear this misconception? So you use a third party interference, and if even that fails, be magnanimous, be forgiving, because you see what is happening now is that you are innocent, and you have done your part in trying to shift the blame from your own self through your intermediary, but that has not happened. And when this is the case, I can tell you from a lot of people's experiences that you just need to be patient, and somehow it is God who comes down and helps you, and He clears the situation for you. He is just checking whether you are patient enough or not. You see, at times these situations are a check for us as well, that if a person is bad to you, how do we react? So it's always easy to be good to good people. Our test is to be good to bad people also. Our test is to take blame and not to react as well. So you see, at times God checks that. So if we pass that check and that test, you'll realize that on many occasions, God creates a situation in which that misunderstanding gets cleared, and that person comes back to you and he even apologizes for that. So in a nutshell, my answer would be that don't react, even if it's such a grave blame, because if you're innocent, then your innocence is inshallah going to be proved one day. However, if you were to be blamed and you think that although the complete blame is not with you, but you are partially to be blamed for that, or partially blamed for what happened, then of course the right course of action would be to accept that partial blame and tell the other person that my role is just partial, and maybe it was inadvertent, and maybe it was driven because of these causes. But in most cases, I would say that anger arises because you feel that you're innocent. So in that case, just wait patiently, use an intermediary, and if you are patient enough for some time, you'll realize that this gives you spiritual strength as well. This builds up that spiritual strength in you. It makes you a better person as well. You come out a better person, and you'll also find God helping you in a way that you cannot even imagine.
Thank you so much, Dr. Saab. We had a very beautiful session today. It was our last question of the session, so we'll call it a now. Thank you once again, and thank you to all the participants. We'll see you next Sunday, same time.
Okay, thank you very much. Do try those anger tips. Those anger tips are very, very special, because I went through them myself. Okay, goodbye. Khuda Hafiz.